Hello, everybody. Now it's time to start. We have to start at 11 o'clock. Claude Corbier will be coming with us in a minute. Now, as you know, at Agora Avantex, we are hosting different specialists and are thinking about what they're doing in the industry in the future. Often we have startups, people who are inaugurating new processes, and they've been doing so for many years, as Monsieur Claude Corbier will indicate to us. And today we need to talk about solutions, services which are more reactive, which is something that's more and more necessary, particularly with the changing methods of the consumer, who is more and more demanding and exacting. We are talking today about modernization, innovation, and reconversion. We have therefore added other guests. And we're going to talk about winning strategies, textile industries, and mills. So obviously, all of you can ask as many questions as you wish, and I'm going to present all the guests. Claude, what do you do? What did you invent some time ago? Just a minute, huh? Hi. I invented lots of things. Great. So you're going to have a lot to say, will you? Previously, I invented a very economic processes to transform second choice yarn to top quality yarn with continuously milled polyester. And this was sold to Philips in the United States. What were they doing with it? Actually, I'm not quite sure what they did with it. We're going to ask people around in the public. Then I invented a modern procedure to actually make a folded material, which I invented in 1977 without knowing Fortuny, which was a fantastic inventor. Malik Matara told me about this. So it took us 3 years for it to be accepted by the customers. And in 1880, it actually took off throughout the world, and it was copied. And we can still carry out the best folded materials for very wide materials. We actually made a fantastic dress for a show with a beautiful train of 6 meters in length. The other invention I made, which is a long printer, a machine to print wefts of material, which gives very delicate effects, which were popular in certain eras, particularly for drapery and finishings, fabric finishings. Everybody thought this was impossible, but some people actually took the plunge, and they knew that it would become popular. So we'll come back to you later. So next, Matthias Ganem, you didn't invent anything, but you're in a tech startup, Tekin. This is a startup which proposes ready-to-wear small series so that are available very rapidly by reconstructing the whole manufacturing process. So this is the heart of the debate. Jean-Baptiste, I represent 2 institutions, La Fabrique, which is the technical school for artisan techniques, particularly this was previously the SIV, the Atelier Grégoire, which associates drapery and leather goods, and also the shop window dressers for Paris. So I am in charge of innovation for this activity, and in parallel I'm 50% at the European Centre for Innovative Textiles. And I am particularly concerned by a digital transformation of textiles. Yes, there is a common stand here between textile and smart and city. So it's very important for all these techniques to actually be seen by different routes. So, Jérôme, 4 Carrés is an agency, a consultancy, where we actually accompany small and medium-sized business and major companies about their prototyping to actually transform them into 3D printing. This can be soft materials or rigid materials. We work with the fabric with this, and there are also different machines that are available. Is it difficult to actually print 3D print soft materials and supple materials? No. Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting challenge. At Tekin, you actually use manual and traditional methods of production. Yes, we've seen that ready-to-wear materials are coming out in smaller and smaller series and very quickly. And when you go to a standard manufacturer and you ask for very fast production and small series, he will either say no, or he will say it's a difficult thing to do. So we have tried to change all this. You're an intermediary then, between the manufacturer and the distributor. Is that right? Exactly, yes. And how do you do this? Well, we've rethought the production process. Normally in the textile business, there are lots of correspondence and lots of coming and toing and froing. So we try to streamline this whole process. So we try and manage it and really streamline the whole information flow using standard internet tools and an internet platform. Do you therefore actually streamline it on both sides? Well, with regard to capacity, we offer, we propose to the brand to reserve a certain capacity. So we work out how much capacity they have on average per year and how much can they give to the particular distributor. And the brand itself has to be flexible with regard to the type of materials that they use and textiles that they use. We haven't adapted this to particular companies, but we try and manage the requirements of the brands and try and match them up with the capacities of the producers. Do you do this in the same manner for 3D? Well, 3D printing one of the major advantages of this is the unit cost, which is rather low. If you compare this to traditional techniques of manufacturing, particularly in textiles, we can make very strong economies of scale, and we are much cheaper per unit. So we don't have so many economies of scale. And then there are technical advantages, the shapes that we can produce, the creativity that this engenders, which is really quite incredible compared to conventional methods. It's interesting to note that with 3D printing, as far as I know, we are not curbed or hampered by the number of models or units that can be generated compared to what was traditionally produced in the past, with a traditional design process. Well, that's right. To give you a concrete example, so we're talking about mass customization. This is what we're aiming at. We're trying to take this out of the luxury sector, and one of the areas where bespoke products are very convincing is for when it is a question of a human body, for example, in the medical sector. And, for example, ETAM or H&M actually carried out a campaign. So everybody could have their own shoes, which were actually printed in a particular shop, and so these were custom-made shoes. And there are other advantages as well with regard to recycling, biodegradability, electronic incrustation. Yeah, it's admirable. Yes, we're going to talk about this later. So you actually teach innovation to young people in school, of course. And this is a very important aspect. For you, innovation, if I've understood well, is with regard to innovation in techniques and materials. So you have an idea, and you've had many over the years. And so this is the specific feature of Cortex. So there are now different expectations. People are want to have faster and faster delivery. So do you feel that these demands are changing, or is Cortex actually just carrying on as usual? I think we can be like a sponge, and we can actually suck up what's happening in society. So this is why invention is based on the idea that if the problem is too difficult, you should think about it, it breaks down, and you imbibe it, if you like. This is what Descartes said. Yes, he said, carry on according to your own logic. Yes, that's true. And there are abnormal elements. What do you mean by abnormal? You mean a customer that is asking for something specific? If you're talking about folding, which is one of our specialities, we traditionally use machines that were invented by Espelink, and I have sold folding machines. But these are anti-mechanical machines because, they cut it up like sausages, if you like. There is a solution, however. That is to look at it out of the box and turn around the material. And this is how I invented the plissé fortuné folding technique. And now we can actually have long warp type of folds on the materials, but continuously. So when you invent an application, do you feel that the market is ready for it? The market is obtuse. For example, I invented the technique of Fortuné in 1977. I had to wait until 1980 for it to be accepted by the market. I visited customers and they said to me, this is not what we're doing. We're not actually manufacturing pot covers. But from 1980 onwards, it began to be recognized, and people recognized how it could be used. You had to know how it to be used. You had to educate these people into how the material could be used. And from then on, Actually, the whole thing took off, and now it's available all over the world. And we can actually now work on up to 12 meters in width. Yes, and I've actually heard that also for laser cutting, we need to do this over very large widths. And that's very interesting because innovation is abroad and it's permanently happening. And so demand is a little bit different. Now, we're talking about innovation. How do we actually teach innovation at school? There are different types of innovation. You've got 3 departments, have you not? We have, yes, so we have 3 different departments. Well, for me, innovation, I talk about the material, the process, and the products. How we're going to do it, what we're going to do it with, and how. So the baseline is the material. No, it's one of these 3 elements that is the baseline. And sometimes you have to adapt the material to achieve the results that we want. I actually studied as an engineer, and then I did arts and crafts, and I wasn't necessarily intending to work in the fashion industry. It was because I met various people when I was doing my thesis. And today, I'm not necessarily looking for the best idea, but I'm looking for different ideas from different spheres. For example, I might look at an Airbus and look at how they do certain things. The Airbus 345, which is light, and textiles are used. They use textiles. This is a carbon pre-impregnated material, which is unidirectional, and it is applied on a mold, which is a 360-degree mold. And you could imagine that this unidirectional monopoly could be applied to a human body or other supports. And so I really like to look at different areas like jewelry, aeronautics, aerospace, because, textiles are really used in this domain. NASA developed a thermal shield in 3D mesh. So this is circular material which is textured, and it's also screened, and it may be ceramic coated as well. And this actually makes a thermal screen, which is a little bit like an umbrella. So, all this innovation, all these different ideas, and no matter where they come from, can be used in another sector. I think this is universal, is it not? One application in 3D, for example, 3D printing started in the aeronautical field, and now it's used in other domains, is it not? Yes. Yes. I was working in the automotive sector, and I'm standard heavy engineering. And there have been incredible advances in the 3D printing industry today because everything can be customized and can also be produced large series. It can be applied to very simple plastics and resins. Today, we're not printing textiles, but we're elastomers and polymers. We have adapted the whole 3D printing system to actually take account of these new materials which can be used for fashion products. Would you like to say something about what he's just said? Yes. I agree with him. Innovation in 3D is today mostly with materials, the raw materials, both financially and the technical side as well. So this is the case for all materials, metal, you can use it, ceramic. Can you use wood? Not necessarily. Yes, it's plastic which actually is impregnated with wood. Yes, we can use glass. It can be applied to all these different base products. It's a very vast field, and one of the obstacles is the speed of operation, but this isn't a sticking cause. It might actually curb us slightly, but it isn't a sticking point in general. There are always ways around this. And the method of manufacture allows us to do things that we weren't able to do in the past. And time, of course, is of the essence. Materials now. How do you see these in your professions between the order givers and the manufacturers? Is it very important for you? Yes, it's vital. Because we're in charge of cutting the materials, so the materials have to be used correctly. They have to be able to be assembled afterwards, so the cutting is of prime importance. So a cutting table is important. We have to be able to place the material on it correctly. And the actual patterns have to be correctly placed on the fabric. So we have developed a system whereby we film the material before we actually cut it out, and so the machine actually puts the patterns on the material before it's cut out. Yes, so the fabric is really very important. And Claude, and you used a polyester fiber, is that right? Not only. What are other materials, what are new materials are on the market which are better for your applications? In the folding field, the best material is polyester. This is sure. Followed by polyamide. There are other products that no longer exist. Acrylic, we don't use this anymore. And that's about it. Aren't there any natural materials? Don't you have natural materials like viscose? Yes, you can. Let me give you an example. If you have a longitudinal fold and polyester is in the weft, this will be a permanent fold, no matter what. So I produce tissues in silk with a weft yarn made of polyester. If you have a horizontal fold, it is the warp that has to be polyester. So one of our latest creations, for example, it's called Odeon. It's like an accordion. It's a little bit, it's not necessarily regular. And this is where the actual warp has to be polyester, but the weave can be of any different material. But there has to be a limited permanent effect. What does this mean? I'm not a technician, so could you explain to us? So if you do a fold on a silk material, if you actually, as you have to actually treat it at high temperature, it actually makes the fold permanently, which means it can be dry cleaned. It can be hand washed as well, if one is very careful, and then held up. But these are just details. But there is a certain amount of leeway involved. And at the moment, I'm looking for finishing products for silk, which will actually give this permanent pleating. This exists based on polyester. There is acrylic as well. I think polyester is most interesting in this, and I would like your help in this matter. Well, I'm not a textile engineer, but I wouldn't go into details, therefore. But we worked for major houses with regard to functionalization of noble materials, notably cashmere, to make it waterproof and stain resistant, etc. This is a material called Dyneema. Do you know about Dyneema? What is this? Do you know what it is, Mr. Ganeb? It is not a high modulus polyester, I don't think so. It's a very resistant plastic, scratch-proof. What its chemical formula is, I wouldn't be able to tell you, but so you know, Avantex, we cover all the different technological solutions. But you know, this is the job of many weavers. What I'm telling, so I have somebody in my family. My sister is actually working on oil rigs on ships, and they use Dyneema on ships under the sea because it's very light and it allows them to anchor their different elements. And so this is something that has been very well known in this field for the last 25 years. And so this is what I like to do. I like to go from one field to another. I love this textile sector and all the debates that it engenders. There's all these different applications that can be put into place. Obviously, an innovation in one particular field will have an echo or can be engendered in another domain. Well, I think that's true, effectively. The advantage of the textile sector is that you can actually produce flexible, supple materials. For example, mesh and knits. We're actually integrating sensors into the fabric. And this is very, very interesting because we can use this on jacquard materials and on weaves. And this can be used this is used by a very famous French ribbon producer. It's quite complicated to do, but there are other types of applications in embroidery. So normally they have to look in the medical sector, the armament sector, because the normal conventional methods means that they're no longer competitive. Well, this is very interesting. You know this Esata. Do you know Esata, the company? Yes, I like them. I use one of their products, and I've been using it for my last creation, which is a diagonal fold, a diagonal pleat, which is three-dimensional, very fluid, very supple. This is like something completely out of this world.
Sur ce que Jean-Baptiste disait.
Yes, I'd like to pick up on what Jean-Baptiste was saying about innovation. I'm convinced that the textile industry can learn a lot from innovation in other industries. And as a result, they can also bring a lot of things to other industries. I mean, you're talking about lightness and yes, well, textile is really gaining a foothold in other industries. It improves performance. But in marketing and in fashion, we see that this process, the creativity process. I mean, fashion is renewed every year. But this is used. This type of material is used in other areas such as the food industry. But for other industries, for example, in the car making sector, if you look at past events, you can see that there are some manufacturing and automating processes for machines and production lines. And you can see that these processes can be integrated in the textile industry. The textile industry has remained question. Well, there's a feeling that there's been a sort of disconnect between the sort of classical or traditional textile industry and other industries like the medical industry, which really woke up to the importance of textile in the last 40 years. I mean, we're one of the countries in Europe that's really in the lead. Answer. Well, there's a real divide today, and I think we need to break down silos between the so-called classical or traditional industry and industries which revolve around fashion or not. I think that industrial products are available for everybody, and I think everybody should be able to use these products for their everyday business. Claude. Well, I'd like to pick up on what you said about the need to create collections on a regular basis in the furniture industry, but also in the clothing industry, in the fashion industry. And this is one aspect of creation. There's another aspect in creation. It's the development of long-term processes. So there's one thing which goes at a really fast pace, fashion. But there's also creation for the long term, the creation of new and innovative processes, and it takes time. Yes, I hear a lot of industrialists. They have such R&D and innovation policies, and they say that the market has some needs and ideas. There's always a gap of 3 years between the moment the idea is floated and the moment it comes into application. For example, if you look at applications in the healthcare industry, health textiles, it usually takes up to 3 or 4 years to reach the optimal application. There might be interim stages, of course, but 3D printing can be really useful here because the unit cost is very low. And so we can fight planned or programmed obsolescence. We can fix things for the same cost for which we created the unit. For example, there's a company that creates printed watch boxes, and if you don't like this box 3 or 4 months afterwards, the cost of change to replace this case will be very low. And you don't need to go to an industrial company for this. But I mean, industry can be understood in many different ways, and in the Anglosphere, in English, industry can also encompass services and many other things. Answer. Well, it can include a supply chain with huge inventories or inventory management. But it doesn't have to be like this. You can have local production facilities which can cater for the needs of a very, very diverse customer base. But I mean, the marginal costs will be nearly inexistent. And so the joint creation really contributes to this. So if we keep innovating in raw materials and commodities, but for example, if fabric can be used going forward for embedded electronics or the things, all these advantages will combine, and I think that it opens very, very interesting prospects. Thank you. So yes, 3D printing can really reduce lead times, but also, we always have, there's always a minimum amount of time. For example, if you look at the automotive industry today, 40 years ago, a car required 4 months in terms of development. Today, it takes 18 months, but it's difficult to make it shorter. In the textile industry, in terms of development, it's difficult to go beneath 3 years in terms of development. And as Matthias was saying, the fashion industry, the haute couture companies and fast fashion do not have the time. They cannot wait for 3 years. They cannot wait, for example, for the new optic fiber technology. Now, we work with our usual partners, Vuitton, Hermes, but for really technological products, we try to partner up with the medical industry or the arms industry. So we're talking about applications that may find a use on the consumer market. Yes. Well, I'd like to tell you about something I'm quite proud of. Next week we're staging a hackathon with engineering students and students from other schools. And thanks to TechTerra, we got in touch with the French Arms Procurement Agency, the DGA, and we're going to be working next week on the individual equipment of foot soldiers in extreme conditions. So it's a connected equipment in extreme conditions, so either very hot or very cold environments. But today, it would be very difficult to work on a project like this with a fashion company. They tried the heating coat. But they thought it was an interesting idea, but they understood that the electronic parts, the development of electronics would take 3 years. The development of the printed fabric would take just 6 months. So, yes, the problem is that customers change their minds every season. Right. So we're trying to take up a position in industries that. Alice, who works with us, would say that, and actually I'd like to praise her for the great organization of these panel discussions, but functionality is an increasingly important parameter in clothes as well. Yes, but for example, for really advanced function, to measure the heartbeat, the heart rate, the skin acidity, or many different metrics. Yes, because we worked, for example, on the detection of potential epilepsy bouts or fits. Yes. Well, we're realizing gradually that these industries have the time to embark upon our R&D projects, the medical industry, the arms industry, but we're talking about several million budgets, budgets of several million euros. So, right. But when you start such processes, such sort of industrial processes, do you think beforehand about potential applications in the fashion industry? For example, the shape memory technologies, is that something that you can use in other industries going forward? Well, I think we shouldn't be doing this. I mean, if you don't think about your main user, your main customer, I don't think it's the best thing to do. For example, we have developed a lot of things, a lot of materials and fabrics that are used on the moon and on Mars, and you can see them in many other applications today. For example, advanced thermal comfort. Outlat, for example, is a company that makes fabrics with particles that change, that the face changes. For example, it's kind of wax particles that can melt and re-solidify, and so it's for cosmonauts. So when they are turned when they face the sun, for example, they don't have to suffer from the heat, and so this application, the face changes depending on where they're looking to. But then these applications may find a more casual purpose. But right now, trekking. What you do lots of things. You're cutting, for example. What about these advanced technologies? I suppose this would not be part of your core business. Well, we think much more about the process than the product. Yes, well, for example, customers ask for tailor-made garments, and sometimes brands decide to launch one-off operations, for example, a promotional offer in a Hong Kong store. Well, we have to be very responsive with our manufacturing system. And when you look at what happens with H&M, there have been some outrageous practices. They throw away apparently 20% of their collections. What about recycling materials? Well, I don't think they really care about this. And when you look at the promotional offers or sale campaigns, I mean, brands today constantly have to sell off their products, and sometimes they throw away their products because they haven't sold them. And it really erodes their margins because of these promotional offers. Well, maybe it would be time to tell them to switch to on-demand production. Right, but do you manage to find solutions by adapting their manufacturing processes? Well, we ask them to sort of analyze their P&L, or their financials. They know that they're wasting a lot of money. And we try to assess this. And then we try to assess with them the collection rate or pace, so to speak. We try to see how we can help them in their manufacturing process. And we try to accelerate the manufacturing process. Right, you've just referred to H&M. Today, consumers are asking for recyclable products. So, in your school or in the city, is that something that students are demanding, or is that something that your lecturers or your teachers are developing? Well, we are currently training the future managers of the production lines. So optimizing your process to have only 25 and not 30% of wastage is a good thing, and they're acutely aware of this. For example, cashmere, it's very expensive, so if you can cut waste by 5%, it's always welcome. Now, in terms of materials, yes, now as regards materials, we organized the first conference of higher fashion schools last week. And, well, we had a lot of fun. So we organized a sort of a meet and greet with industrialists and engineers and manufacturers and designers. So we met up, and designers asked us, what are the new materials at the moment? We'd like to work on scrapping, so to speak, well, for example, there was a spinning company, the representative of a spinning company, and there's a lot of waste that falls from the weaving machine or the spinning machine. Well, actually, a model was on display in different shows last year. And that's where really people woke up to the fact that technology can work wonders. And this type of technology can really attract up to 30% of the general public. Yes, so we met with textile engineers who were working on woven materials, and they told us that it can be really high added value material with special effects. It's like, for example, felt There's a lot of very interesting. There are lots of different felt materials for hat making, for example, and you can really make exceptional things with non-woven products. So we had, for example, a designer meeting a textile engineer, and so they started to work on cuts of silk, for example, or wool. So it's very important to have this multidisciplinary approach to try and find a use for resources we already have. So this is happening in the textile industry, but it could also work in the electronics industry. And clearly, tomorrow's resources are in our garbage bins. I think there's a real seam. I mean, the goal of the future is in the garbage bins of the textile industry. Well, this afternoon there will be a panel discussion on how to reduce lead times between design and manufacturing. There will be a lot. We'll talk a lot about recycling, upcycling, and of course this is meant to meet customers' expectations. So you seem to launch an appeal for a dialogue between the different trades, and I think it's quite essential today. How could you manage to do this in your own company? Well, I gave an example earlier on. I was on a night train. It was an 8-hour ride to Paris. I was going to Paris to present my collections. We had no cash at the time, so we would present our collections in the lobby of an hotel. And S-Mod visited us, and she basically fell in love with our collection, and she invited us on their store in the boulevard. And it was amazing. It was the first time we had this kind of symbiosis between a fabric manufacturer. And actually, she was the representative of a fashion school. And she invited us to a school, and it was great to have this sort of symbiosis. Yes, I think it's great to work on a cross trade or cross industry basis today, and I think that the human contact. This is all the person. I mean, human interactions. All of this is very important. I suppose it really drives people to do more and better. Especially when you listen to all the examples you gave us. Now, anything else you'd like to add? I wanted to show you all the wonderful things we do with at Cortex. Maybe the control room can put on screen a few things. And also, I think you've brought a video clip with you. But there it is. Let's watch this short clip.
Donc on rentre dans ton univers. Tu peux.
So this is your realm, so to speak. Well, so this is the online process. This is the printing process of the warp on our weaving machine. We don't take the fabric elsewhere, and this avoids any breaking in the fabric. So it's an ordinary warp. It's a white warp on the loom. So it can be either a uniform, a plain pattern, or a different pattern. So the original pattern is dotted, and with the vibration on the loom, this creates a sort of panther-like effect. Now, this is some footage from our older collections. So that's one type of that's one pleating process. Right. We talked about inventories earlier on, but how many SKUs do you have in your collections? About 100. No, that's not a lot, actually. And you managed to provide the market with all these collections? Well, we scrape by, I'd say. So this is the transfer paper we use to print the warp. So it's just for polyester and other synthetic materials. You cannot use this for all natural fibers. And actually for me, the next step will be to use inkjet. And this will allow us to reach a much broader market with silk, cotton, and all the ICAD byproducts. Okay, maybe we can ask a few questions and we can take questions from the floor. So what would be the next step, as our friend Claude has said? What about you from Tekin? Well, I suggest we just watch this short clip, this short part here. It's really probably the most interesting bit. Well, so you have some time to think about your questions. So I was asking about the next step. What about the city? We are all, all eyes at the moment are on the city. So printing starts whenever you decide, and it stops also whenever you want. You can print 1 meter, 5,000 meters. It's on demand. You can change the paper. You can change colors. And you can also radically change the pattern or the design. So you can create something really exclusive that is copy-proof, so to speak. So you're going to see here that the change of design, and it's all thanks to the change in the speed here. It's very cost effective, and one of our customers in Canada used this process. So he managed to recoup his costs. For the machine in a very, very short period of time. And today he has 5 of our machines. All right, sorry to interrupt. So what would be, Matthias, what would be the next step? Well, Tekin, we're currently sort of dreaming up a fully automated production line where you can fully monitor the production of the garment from A to Z, it's an end-to-end process. You know exactly where the garment is at a given time. If you can find out any defect, you can work out the costs. What about the city and La Fabrique? I suppose you want to do more things with S-Mod. Well, at La Fabrique we have a lot at the moment in store. We have a major project, Ariane. So it's a hint to the French flagship industry, flagship company, and to the Ariadne's thread in mythology. So we've identified the labyrinth. We know where the Minotaur is in this labyrinth, and so we will be trying to take the industry out of this maze where it's been roaming for a long time. This project will be supported by the Paris Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and we will be training our students in the 4.0 industry. And we're going to work with a panel. We'll try to use our long-standing connections. This is really a long-term project question. So will there be businesses, industrial companies, customers and in this project, and students? The answer is yes, we will. I cannot tell you more, but what about the city? Well, I couldn't tell you actually. Well, it's better to go to the booth. Well, the city, in city, recycling is really gaining in significance. We should have an unraveling machine or a carding machine for cotton waste very soon. For unwoven fabrics, we stick to our historical research activities. Right, what about the next step for Romain, for your company 4 Carré, in 3D printing? And well, in 3D printing, materials, the production volumes, and then the production speed. But we also work with our customers on HR-related issues, training matters. We try to help our customers' staff upskill. We try to upgrade them. And broadly speaking, we're trying to work on the topological optimization, what we call natural mimetism. So you can save a lot of material, and you can make the most of 3D printing and create some resistant materials. It's an increasingly new way of designing products, and actually we try to harness artificial intelligence. Right. You're talking about optimization. We've heard a lot about modernization and redeployment, and I mean many different things that I suppose come together. You've talked about the different players in the industry. You've talked about optimization. Probably that's the key word that best defines the future of this industry. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions for our panelists? In French or in English? No questions? Right, it's 11. Now we have one question from the floor. Good morning. Thank you for this very interesting discussion. Who are you? Pascal Mélien. I have a startup, Collective Fashion, which I manage with Estelle. We are located in Station F. It's an incubator in Paris. But Christel was not with you last year, right? It was a different lady. Nice try. So we try to give exposure to manufacturers in the textile apparel industry with blockchain. It wasn't widely known last year, but I think it's actually gaining some exposure. Now, I wanted to ask you about this hackathon. Is this an open event, or do you need to sign up or answer? Well, usually we try to find some interesting topics for businesses throughout the year. If you find an interesting topic for next year, just drop me an email. And now, as for the French Arms Procurement Agency, the DGA, I don't know whether we can invite anyone to the event, but just email me and I'll tell you whether we can include you on the guest list, because we'll be trying to address their issues. Now, they sometimes discuss this in the public sphere, more or less. Now, I suppose the results of the hackathon are, the exclusive property of the agency. Well, thanks very much.